Krishna, Hare Krishna. So, welcome. And last week, I had promised you that we were going to begin a new series speaking about Srila Prabhupada. Sometimes it's said devotees are crooked, so I've changed my mind. Well, I think I'm going to do something, not that I think, I know. We're going to do something that will segue us into that discussion, and it will also wrap up or bring to conclusion our previous discussion on the mind. And so what I wanted to do, or the thought that came to me yesterday, was I wanted to talk about excuses, because excuses are one of the big things that the mind gives us. So it gives us a rationale for why we can't do something. And so in any discussion that talks about the mind, then certainly we should talk about excuses, because that's a very big thing the mind produces. At the same time, as I said, we wanted to talk about Srila Prabhupada, and I thought, well, let us reflect on how Prabhupada dealt with this topic of excuses. So what I did was I went and studied, particularly Srila Prabhupada's letters, to see how he spoke about excuses. And I came up with some very interesting letters. And one thing about Prabhupada's letters, which I like so much, is that they're different from his books in the sense that he's dealing with practical issues and guiding people on a day-to-day basis how to deal with real-life situations. And this area of excuses is very, very practical. And it's something which is very common, and Prabhupada had to deal with it a lot. So, before I read you the excuses, I came up with another quote, or this quote from Srila Prabhupada came to me. It doesn't relate exactly to excuses, but it borderlines it, but it's such a nice quote I wanted to read it. Srila Prabhupada writes in 1971, this is a letter, "I have noticed your several complaints against the devotees, but it would be better for you to set the example by your personal behavior and try to reform the others not by criticism, but by your friendly behavior." So I thought, it's so easy to blame and it's so easy to find fault. And here Prabhupada is saying, well, rather than blame or find fault, you can correct others if you see a defect by your own example. And by your good example, they'll follow. So I think that in some way relates to excuses, because when we find fault, it's a sort of blame. Well, look what they're doing, and what they're doing is causing a problem for me. And in this case, this devotee was writing Srila Prabhupada, complaining about the devotees, obviously thinking that they were creating a problem for him. And Prabhupada's saying, well, this is how you deal with it. So I thought it's a very nice thing to remember, because we're so inclined to criticize or complain or find fault, where Prabhupada is saying, whatever the fault you see, try to behave in a way which is exemplary. And Prabhupada says here, by your friendly behavior, not that you condemn and criticize, but by your good example and friendly behavior, you will motivate people. So, now let us see who is with us today, so we can welcome you all. We have Bhakti and Carol, we have Sorab, and we have Martha, and we have Sneha. We have new people, and we have many of you who have not checked into chat. If you'd like to come to chat, just click below my picture where you see me, see the video, and you can get into chat, create your own password, and you can ask questions or take part in discussion. So, these are letters that I collected this evening, which I thought were relevant to the topic of excuses. And then after we read and discuss these, we can talk more about excuses and how we ourselves fall into the trap of making excuses. So, this is from 1972. They are pointing out irregularities. Prabhupada's referring to devotees who were, again, complaining. They are pointing out irregularities, but they themselves are not doing their duty. So they are pointing out the irregularities in others. They came to serve, now they don't want to serve, so there is some excuse. Prabhupada got a letter, and the devotees were saying, there's no service for me in this temple. Prabhupada is service, there's so much service. And the devotees were complaining that they're not engaged and so forth. So then Prabhupada said, well, they're pointing out irregularities, but they themselves are not doing their duty. They're not doing anything. They're not taking the initiative. They're not being proactive. They're just pointing out what's wrong. They came to serve, now they don't want to serve, so there is some excuse. So Prabhupada's saying, the excuse they're making is that they're not being engaged. Oh, irregularity. Let me go away. They wanted to leave the temple, go somewhere else. The workers should not suggest irregularities. In other words, by irregularity, Prabhupada is meaning basically the devotees are complaining about the management, that they're not properly engaged, they don't have proper service, and so forth. And Prabhupada is indirectly making the point that there's always service to do, and to say there's no service is a big excuse. And he's even making the point that they're using this as an excuse to avoid service. One thing I can say about Srila Prabhupada is that he didn't like excuses. And I would not want to be one to go in front of Srila Prabhupada with an excuse. You'd only want to go in front of Srila Prabhupada remorseful for making a mistake and with a plan or a goal of how to correct yourself and do the right thing. Because that's what Prabhupada wanted. That's what he expected. You could say that's what he demanded. He was not the kind of person that would take an excuse and say, oh, I feel sorry for you. Yes, very bad. I have empathy for that. He didn't like excuses. Because he saw excuses for what they were. Just ways of avoiding serving Krishna and ways of allowing Maya to enter our life. Of course, sometimes there may be a valid excuse. That's a different thing. Something which is beyond our control. But anything in which we have control, Srila Prabhupada, he wouldn't accept the excuse. He'd want to see what can you do positively to resolve a problem, to overcome a difficulty. But making excuses, as we'll see from reading more of the letters, Prabhupada saw as a sign of immaturity, irresponsibility, and also a lack of understanding Krishna consciousness. So let's read the next letter. This is from 1972. This is June 13th. So if you have access to the database, then or you can go on Krishna.com and get access to it. This is called Correspondence 720613. Of course, there are many correspondences there. I didn't write down the names of the devotees Prabhupada was corresponding with, but you can find it there if you'd like. Now, this was a letter to a devotee. I'm just checking here to make sure. I'm not sure in relation what it was in relation to. Perhaps I'll remember when I begin reading it. Prabhupada writes, "It is not a matter of changing our engagement, adjusting this or that material condition, in order to find our real happiness. Krishna consciousness is not like that. It is able to be performed under any variety of material conditions or with any type of engagement." So this is, right here, Prabhupada's dealing with a big excuse that I'm not inspired by this service, or in this condition it's difficult to serve. So he's saying in any condition we can serve Krishna, in any engagement we can have any engagement. It's not dependent on a particular environment, situation, service to be inspired. So let me read that again. It is not a matter of changing our engagement. I guess this devotee wanted some other service or wanted to change his ashram. Or I wouldn't say change his ashram, give up the ashram that he decided to change into, which would mean leaving his wife. It is not a matter of changing our engagement, adjusting this or that material condition in order to find our real happiness. Krishna consciousness is not like that. It is able to be performed under any variety of material conditions or with any type of engagement. Therefore, if your duty as a photographer is very much helpful to our propaganda work and for improving our BTG, then there is very much need for your remaining in that occupation and doing it to your best capacity. It is a fallacy to say that my present engagement with the press is not the best for my spiritual advancement. And if we think in this way, we may go on trying out one engagement after another and always say the same excuse. In other words, Prabhupada is pointing out that this devotee is restless, thinking another engagement will be better. And Prabhupada could see that for this devotee, if he changes his engagement, it's very likely that he's going to say the same thing after a while. It's very clear that that's what Prabhupada's saying here. So, of course, Prabhupada may write different things to different devotees, but to this particular devotee, he sees that there's this tendency that he'll do another engagement and say, well, this isn't the right engagement. I don't like it. It's not perfect. Material conditions are not right. I'm being adversely affected, and so forth. So let me read that again. It is a fallacy to say that my present engagement with the press is not the best for my spiritual advancement. And if we think in this way, we may go on trying one engagement after another and always say the same excuse. This restlessness or agitation of the mind cannot be rectified by altering the material circumstances. So Prabhupada's pointing out the problem here is not the external situation, but it's the restlessness of the mind. It's a very important point. This devotee's not seeing that's the problem, that he's restless. And Prabhupada's saying, it's not your material condition, it's your restlessness. And that's why you're not satisfied, and that's why you're thinking of other engagements. This restlessness or agitation of the mind cannot be rectified by altering the material circumstances. If we are Krishna conscious, any type of occupation will suit me, and we shall always be satisfied. This is a form of simplicity, a form of the 26 qualities of a devotee. The devotee is satisfied, or Prabhupada would say, satisfied in any situation. In one letter, Prabhupada said, satisfied with a little prasadam, a place to sleep, and some service. He said, that's a Vaishnava. So being satisfied is a symptom of spiritual advancement. Therefore, I recommend you to read books more and more and try to understand the subject matter from different angles of vision, and be always discussing it with your godbrothers, even while you are working at the press. And when you are working and you cannot read, then listen to the tapes of my lectures and hear in that way. And never neglect to chant your 16 rounds. Rise early without fail, attend Mangalarti, take bath. Follow the other regulative principles, and everything will come out very successfully. You can rest assured of that. So here Prabhupada is giving the formula. If you do these things, rise early, chant your rounds, and so forth, follow the principles, then you'll be satisfied. And he's saying here, not directly, but we can understand it, saying that your restlessness is due to not strictly following the principles of Krishna consciousness, because if you do, you'll be happy, you'll be satisfied. Because Krishna consciousness it's transcendental, so material conditions cannot affect one who's in Krishna consciousness, or not even one who's totally absorbed in Krishna consciousness, but at least absorbed in following the practices of Krishna consciousness. So it's a very, very nice letter. If you have any questions or comments, then please ask away. Okay. Bhakti Edgar is with us. Welcome. And I'm going to read another letter. This is from 1972 again. It is December 17th. Our business is to raise ourselves to the highest status of life as preachers of Krishna's message. And one should behave himself rigidly, then he should instruct others. 2 things. Be himself exemplary, then teach others to be exemplary. If one has not come to that high standard, he cannot judge others or criticize others. There is one saying in the Bible, judge not, lest ye be judged. So how can we preach unless we are able to make judgments? That will not be possible. Only those who are above suspicion can judge others. One must act himself in such a way that he is always above suspicion. Then he can judge others. Then he can judge, then he can preach. But now you have no power to instruct. One who is not following himself, how can he instruct others? So this was in regards to a devotee who both was critical of others, but he himself eventually gave up Krishna consciousness, or fell down for some time, gave up the practices of Krishna consciousness for some time. So it's often seen that sometimes before one falls in spiritual life, one becomes very critical of others. And here Prabhupada is saying, how can you be critical of others when you yourself aren't following? So first, you have to be a perfect example. As in the first letter we read, where Prabhupada said, actually the example is what inspires others. And rather than criticize them, be the example. So Prabhupada here is saying, actually, because you recently have fallen down, you're a senior devotee, you should have been exemplary, but you fell, so what right do you have to criticize others? Criticism of others is often an excuse we make to blame them for a problem which we have, which is a very disempowering action. If you blame anyone for your own problems, then you become captive of the other person, so to speak, because now you can't change them. I heard one story, the psychologist was talking to a lady, and the lady was saying all her problems are due to her mother. She got all her problems because of the way her mother treated her. So it's all her mother's fault, and she has no responsibility. So the therapist said, okay, bring your mother here, and I'll fix your mother, and when your mother's fixed, you'll be okay. And then she got the point. You can't blame it on anyone else. That's too easy. That's the easy route. And when you blame it on someone else, then you don't do anything about it yourself. So Srila Prabhupada very much wanted us, not that he wanted us, he instructed us, well, of course he wanted us and instructed us to take responsibility for our standing in Krishna consciousness. And whatever situation we are in, we should take responsibility. And we'll read that in some of these other letters. Very, very nice. I think it's the next letter here. It's a very wonderful letter. This is from 1973. This is January 14th. This devotee had written Srila Prabhupada. He was married. He had a young child, maybe only 1 or 2 years old. And this devotee wanted to take sannyas. He wanted to leave his wife and family and enter the renounced order of life, which is generally not done until one is older and the children grow up. Prabhupada writes, now I do not know the situation in your particular case. I am simply giving you the general policy or background understanding. We should never think of our so-called advancement as being conditioned by or dependent upon some set of material circumstances, such as marriage, vanaprast, or this or that. I want to read that again. We should never think of our so-called advancement as being conditioned by or dependent upon some set of material circumstances such as marriage, vanaprast, or this or that. That is very, very, very powerful statement, because so often we're in situations and we're thinking, if I wasn't in this situation, I could be more Krishna conscious. How many of you have thought of that? How many of you out there have ever thought, like, if I was just in another situation, I would be more Krishna conscious? If I was just in the situation of this other devotee who's retired, I would be more Krishna conscious. If I was just in the situation of this brahmachari who doesn't have to work, I would be more Krishna conscious. If I could just live in Vrindavan, I would be more Krishna conscious. If I was just not married, I could be more Krishna conscious. If I was just married, I could be Krishna conscious. If I just took sannyas, I'd be Krishna conscious. If I just could give up my sannyas, I'd be more Krishna conscious. If I didn't have to work, I'd be more Krishna conscious. If I just had a steady job, then I'd be more Krishna conscious. And it goes on and on and on. And Prabhupada's making the point that none of that really ultimately has any bearing on your Krishna consciousness. It's really you and how you deal with your situation and how you make the best or take advantage of your situation. That is the key factor. And another point Prabhupada makes here in this letter, which we'll read, is about responsibility. So it's not giving up something and changing something, but rather it's being responsible for what you do and being steady, and then from that platform going on in Krishna consciousness. I love this letter. It's very, very telling, and it's very relatable to our situation. I saw that everybody out there raised their hand. 100% of you raised their hand. I have mystic power. When I get on Krishna.com, then by the grace, just like Sanjaya had the vision to see, then by the who did Sanjaya get the power to see from? You remember? Does anybody know who's Sanjaya? Was it by the grace of Vyas that he got the power to see? So I get the power to see all of you, and all of you have raised your hand and said, yeah. That's why this saying is there, the grass is greener on the other side. And we look at somebody else. Well, if I was just in Mahatma's position, I'd be Krishna conscious. After all, he got to see Prabhupada. He was initiated by him. He's been a devotee for a long time. And he can sing well, so he can do kirtan. And he has a good brain for this, for philosophy. And he's a good speaker. And if I just were a good speaker and I could lead kirtan, and if I had just been initiated by Prabhupada, and he lives in Alachua, there's so many devotees, he has so much association, if I could just live in Alachua, and on and on and on. And so what we do is we create these conditions which we may never meet, and so we convince ourselves that unless A, B, C, and D are fulfilled, I can't be Krishna conscious. And then we trap ourselves. So it's very, very, when you look at it, it's really a foolish way to think. The grass is not greener on the other side. The grass is greener where you water it. And so you can water your grass from wherever you are. You can water your devotional creeper from wherever you are. So, who do we have here? Rama 108 has joined us. Hare Krishna, Rama 108. So, let us continue. Mature understanding of Krishna consciousness means that whatever condition of life I am in at present, that is Krishna's special mercy on me. Therefore, let me take advantage in the best way possible to spread this Krishna consciousness movement and conduct my spiritual master's mission. What a powerful statement. Whatever position, whatever condition I am in presently, that is Krishna's special mercy on me. What a nice way to think. Because often we think, oh, woe is me. I'm in such a bad condition. Why me? Why do I have to be in this condition? I'm suffering so much. I have so many problems. So many disadvantages. It's funny that as Americans, there's so many things that bother us that don't bother people in other countries. And we get all psychotic and neurotic about simple things. Oh, there are 4 people in the line in front of me and I'm having a nervous breakdown. We're so spoiled. Where in other countries people tolerate so much without complaining. So a lot of times we Americans or Westerners become drama queens about our problems, and then we're focused on our problems, and as we focus on our problems, what happens? They seem bigger and more insurmountable. So Prabhupada is stating here something that will help us tremendously. He's saying, whatever condition I'm in, this is my wife, this is my husband, these are my children, this is the temple I'm in, this is the service I have, this is the work I have, these are the handicaps I have, these are the opportunities I have, these are the obstacles I have to deal with, these are the challenges I face, these are the circumstances, these are my inabilities. Whatever it may be, think this is Krishna's mercy. And from this position, what does Prabhupada say here? Krishna's special mercy upon me, therefore let me take advantage in the best way possible to spread this movement and conduct my spiritual mission, master's mission. Let me take advantage in the best way. It's I just saw this show yesterday. There was a boy, 2 years old. He was in the garage, and he had picked up a gasoline bottle, and he'd pour the gasoline on the floor, and there was a water heater in the garage, and it ignited the fire, and he burned up in the fire, and they thought he was going to die, but somehow or other he survived, and his hands fell off, and his feet fell off, and his face was burnt, and so forth. And he gave a talk, and he said, you know, God saved me, and I'm really blessed, and I really see that I'm so fortunate because I can do, God really wants me to do something because he saved me. And he was just talking, I forget the details, but he was talking about how fortunate he was and how blessed he was. And here's this guy with a deformed face, doesn't have any hands, doesn't have any feet, and he's just talking about how blessed he is. And I was thinking, you know, some people have everything and they just complain. I mean, some people are just expert at complaining, and they have 101 reasons why things are bad. And here, this guy has every reason to complain. And his friends say, you have every reason to complain, but he never complains. And it so happens that he became a drummer, and he like drums for all these big groups. And he developed a system where he doesn't really have hands, so he puts this, I don't like what tennis players wear to stop the sweat from their hands. He has a wristband, and he sticks the stick through the wristband. And then he's got like a little something in his hand there, like this, and he holds the stick. So it showed him playing the drums. So he's just jamming on the drums. There's this deformed guy who's become this big drummer. So it was just interesting to see him with such an attitude where he was just saying over and over again, I have nothing to complain about, and I just feel blessed. And he wasn't even complaining. Believed in God, he wasn't complaining. Why did God do this to me? He saw some divine arrangement there. So, very, very interesting mentality. If I consider my own personal progress or happiness or any other thing personal, that is material consideration. A lot of times we think, well, I'm not happy. I wish things were different. And Prabhupada's saying, that's not really how a devotee thinks. A devotee thinks about the happiness of Krishna, happiness of Guru, happiness of the other devotees. If there was unhappy adjustment so now this devotee this is in relation to this devotee wanting to leave his wife. So the reason Prabhupada said, if I consider my own personal progress or happiness or any other thing personal, that's material. Because now the devotee wants to leave his wife, so what's the consideration? Well, I'm not happy. It's very, very common. Well, you get married, you're not really happy with your wife or your husband. You find out actually they're not the way you thought they were, or they've changed, and it's not exactly the way you had dreamt it was going to be. You had a rosy picture of it, but it's not so rosy. And don't think that your situation is unique. It happens to everybody. That's just a reality. So Prabhupada's addressing that, and he's saying, well, now you're thinking, well, I'm not happy in this situation, so I want to get out. Whatever is done, that is a fact. But I am only pointing out that once before you did something without proper study of your real responsibility. Now you are contemplating again some drastic action in a similar matter. What is Prabhupada saying here? He's saying, well, you got married and now you're looking at it and saying, this is not what I thought it was going to be, and I want to get out. And Prabhupada's saying, so now you're taking another drastic measure without considering it. You got married without full consideration of the responsibility. Now you're suggesting another drastic measure without full consideration. Very good point. In other words, he's saying, you don't know what you're doing. You didn't know what you're doing when you got married, and you don't know what you're talking about now. So be more sober. Therefore, consider it carefully in this light. There's one verse from Bhagavad Gita, Yasmin no vijjate loko lokan, no vijjate chaya hangsa marsha bayod vighar muktoyasa chame priyaha. He for whom no one is put into difficulty, and who is not disturbed by anxiety, who is steady in happiness and distress, is very dear to me. 12:15. One mistake of judgment often made by the neophyte devotees is that any time there is some disturbance or some difficulty, they are considering that the conditions or the external circumstances under which the difficulty took place are the cause of the difficulty itself. Yes or yes? You think that way? Oh, the difficulty is caused by what's going on outside of me. Let me read that again. One mistake of judgment often made by the neophyte devotees is that any time there is some disturbance or some difficulty, they are considering that the conditions or the external circumstances under which the difficulty took place are the cause of the difficulty itself. That is not the fact. In the material world, There is always some difficulty, no matter in this situation or that situation. How many of you have experienced that? The material world, it's such a weird place. It's such a weird place. You try to make it perfect. It's never going to be perfect. Don't think that there's anyone in this world who's not facing difficulty. You look at these successful people and you think, oh my God, they must be living the life of Riley, the life of luxury. Everyone is going through difficulty. Nothing is easy. That's the nature of the world. Krishna says that in Bhagavad Gita. It's a struggle. Everyone is struggling with their mind and senses. People are filled with desires to fulfill, and we can't fulfill all our desires. So we're always struggling to fulfill them and do more and get more and have more and be more. And it's not easy. That's why you find in Bhagavatam this one sadhu, he was lying on the side of the road and he said, everybody's working so hard to get what they want, to make themselves happy, and they're never happy. So I just decided to renounce. Why bother? So we so often think, no, the other person, they've got it made. It's only me that is dealing with these difficult situations. Everybody is dealing with it. Even the guy or the girl that is very happy and contented, they're also dealing with it. Everybody's dealing with it, but they're looking at it differently. So here Prabhupada's dealing with the devotees thinking, oh, I'm married and there's so many problems. And Prabhupada's saying, if you give up your wife, do you think your problems are going to go away? They'll still be there. Because the problem is within you, because you're not able to deal with the circumstances because of who you are. So the problem is not out there. The problem is in there. There's a saying, if you don't like where you are, change who you are. So we're always thinking, I have to change what's around me instead of change who I am, what's in me. If you don't like who you are, if you don't like where you are, change who you are. Things change when we change. So Prabhupada's telling this devotee, change yourself, understand that a devotee can adapt to any situation, understand that every situation is difficult, and that because it's difficult, it doesn't mean that now you just give it up. Oh, it's difficult, so I walk away from it. If you understand it correctly, you'll see that difficulties are we really need them to grow. So if you look at it another way, you could look at the difficulties and realize, okay, we all face difficulties. These are difficulties that if I face and deal with, then I will advance further in Krishna consciousness. Where if I just say, well, these external difficulties are the problem, let me change the situation, then I never learn how to deal with them and I don't grow. And then you see what Prabhupada was dealing with here at this time of the movement. It's that so many men wanted to leave their wives. They got married. They saw that married life was much different than the brahmachari life they had been previously leading, which was more a life of freedom. There was less responsibility, at least family responsibility. Not that brahmachari life is irresponsible, but they weren't tied down as much as the grihastha was tied down. So many of the grihasthas, in realizing that grihastha life was not exactly what they thought it was, would write Prabhupada and say, I want to take vanaprastha, or I want to take sannyas, I want to leave my wife, I want to dedicate myself fully to preaching. And Prabhupada saw in many of them that if they left their wife, they would have not fully dedicated their lives to preaching, but they probably would have gotten married again, or fallen down with another woman, or maybe even left Krishna consciousness. And secondly, even if they could renounce, he wanted them to be responsible. Number one, for their own benefit, and number two, for the benefit of their wife, because here their wife is depending on them. And then number three, Prabhupada said, in one letter he said, everyone understands that household life means wife, it means home, it means family, it means earning money. Why you have trouble understanding that? And so many devotees wanted to give it up when they saw what it was. And he's saying, hello, don't you? Everybody understands that's what it's about. So he really saw this as a very irresponsible behavior amongst men. And so therefore he's addressing it in a philosophical way so that they can apply it to all situations in their life, not just grihastha life. So let's continue reading. I'll go back to what I read. One mistake of judgment often made by the neophyte devotees is that any time there is some disturbance or some difficulty, they are considering that the conditions or the external circumstances under which the difficulty took place are the cause of the difficulty itself. Excuse. I have my excuse. It's the external situation. That's why I am unhappy. That's why I'm having difficulty. It's my wife's fault. It's my kid's fault. It's the ashram's fault. Grihastha ashram. You can't make any advancement in Grihastha ashram. There's just too much disturbance. There's too much sexual agitation. Too much this. So you have your whole list of excuses. And now you have justified your fallen condition. You think Prabhupada would buy that? Never. 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 Believe me. That is not the fact. In this material world, there's always some difficulty, no matter in this situation or that situation. Therefore, simply by changing my status of occupation or my status in life, that will not help anything. Wow. Simply by changing my status of occupation or my status of life, that will not change anything. That's amazing. That will not change anything? What is Prabhupada saying here? He's saying, you are who you are. So if you change something external, it's not changing. It's not going to change who you are. What is going to change who you are is you, not the external situation. If you think the external situation is going to change who you are, then what do you do to change yourself? You don't do anything but change the external situation. So you spend your whole life changing the external situation instead of doing the real work of changing yourself. It's said, never underestimate how difficult it is to change yourself. Never overestimate how difficult it is to change others. In other words, you can change yourself, but very difficult to change others. So don't underestimate your ability to change yourself. You can do it. But when we give into this idea that we can't, that we need certain external situations, then we defeat ourselves. And it's really, really stupid to say those things, to think that way, because you put yourself in a situation where basically you're telling yourself, I can't change myself, I can't improve myself, I can't make things better, I can't deal with this. All I can do is change what's going on outside of me. Very, very bad way of thinking. Therefore, simply by changing my status or occupation or my status in life, that will not help anything. Because the real fact is that if there is any difficulty with others, that is my lack of Krishna consciousness, not theirs. Because the real fact is, if there is any difficulty with others, that is my lack of Krishna consciousness, not theirs. Is that clear? That is such a powerful statement, because what we see so often is that we point the finger at others. We blame others. The problem is them. The problem is not me. By saying the problem is them, we are also saying, even if we don't verbalize it, we're also saying the problem is not me. I am what I am because of them. What does Prabhupada say here? He says, the real fact is that if there is any difficulty with others, that is my lack of Krishna consciousness, not theirs. Even me seeing the difficulty in others. Now, of course, it's one thing to see a difficulty, or we say call a spade a spade. It's another thing to become totally controlled by that or disturbed by that. So we can't say that Prabhupada's saying others don't have faults, others don't make mistakes. He's not saying there may be a time when we have to speak up or correct them. But what he's saying is we cannot blame them for our situation, our unhappiness, our lack of Krishna consciousness. That is such a common excuse, that it is this or that or this or that situation. There was one devotee, he wanted to take sannyas, and Prabhupada wrote him a little sarcastic or jokingly, you could say, but made his point. He said, you don't need a pole to preach. So this devotee was a grihastha. He was a grihastha, and he was thinking, well, if I take sannyas, then I can preach. Prabhupada was preaching in his grihastha life. He was publishing BTG. He was doing so many things. So Prabhupada was saying, you don't need a pole to preach. So some of us were thinking, well, without a pole, I can't preach. Now, there were so many devotees who got the pole, the sannyas ashram, who later gave up their preaching and entered the Grihastha ashram. So there was no guarantee that taking sannyas, changing one's external dress, was going to give them ultimate opportunity for preaching. Because again, it was the internal consciousness that needed to change, not the external dress. So the point being here is that oftentimes we're afraid to confront our own difficulties. And any time we blame a circumstance or another person, we should consider, is there something that I'm avoiding to accept about myself? And is that why I'm blaming someone else? Anytime we make an excuse, we can ask ourselves, what am I trying to avoid here by making this excuse? Is it that I don't want to change? Is it that I don't want to adopt another behavior or attitude? So therefore, I'm making an excuse to convince myself that I really can't do something. And if I convince myself I can't do it, then I don't need to make any adjustments. So I have a friend, Akura. I think some of you have seen Akura. He was here about a year ago. No, a little more than a year ago. And he did several episodes on Krishna.com. And one of the things that Akura was fond of saying, I forget how he said it, but sometimes in counseling devotees, when they would explain to him what they want to do and why they're having difficulty doing it, after they would explain it, he would say, those are just excuses. That was his reply. Those are just excuses. And what was the point he was making? The point he was making is, don't focus on the problem. Don't focus on what you can't do. Focus on what you can do. So we often focus on what we can't do, or focus on the person that's causing the problem for us so that we can't do something. Focus on what we can do. Focus on how we can deal with the situation in the most Krishna conscious way. Focus on moving forward. If you do that, then the excuses, they kind of just move to the side, because you realize anything that you want to achieve, you won't achieve it by making excuses. You'll only achieve it by going forward, taking the little steps, doing what you can do. And excuses prevent you from going forward. So ultimately, excuses totally disempower you and have no real value for your goals. Now, you might say, but what if the excuse is true? Well, who decided it's true? I would venture to say that most of your excuses are not true, or they're not entirely true. And how can we prove this? Look at any excuse you have and ask yourself, is that 100% true? Well, I'm not smart enough to achieve this. And you ask yourself, is that 100% true? That you're not smart enough? Or it may be you don't even need to be smart to achieve that. Do you really need to be that smart to achieve that in the first place? If you do that, you will find most of your excuses, if not all of them, are flawed because they're not true, at least not entirely. If it's not entirely true, then it means, if, for example, here, that there's the possibility that you are smart enough to do it. If it's not entirely true that you're not smart enough, then there is a possibility that you are, or you have enough intelligence, enough smarts to be able to do it. And ultimately, how would you know you're not smart enough to do it unless you try to do it? Or, if you feel you're not smart enough, then educate yourself so that you become smart enough. But sometimes we have such big excuses that we won't even do that. We won't even try to qualify ourselves to do it. So I like, you can all think of Akura when you have some excuse or some reason. You may not think it's an excuse, but some reason you can't do something, or some reason you're not doing something, you're not taking the initiative to do it, or you're not doing it better, you're not doing it as well as you know you could think of Akura. And you have to go in front of Akura and explain why you're not doing it, or why you're not doing it as well, or why you're procrastinating. And then think if Akura is going to accept your reasoning, or if he's going to just tell you that's just an excuse. So ask yourself, what would Akura say to this? Now, I would like to ask you out there in Krishna.com land what excuses you make, and then we can look at them and we can discuss them. So, Sneha has a question. Okay, Sneha, you can ask a question, and others of you can type in your excuses that you find perhaps you're making right now that's preventing you from doing something you want to do or reaching a goal you want to reach. So Sneha is typing in her question. Actually, I have a list here of the most common excuses that people make. So if I don't get any good excuses from you, then I'll read you the list of good excuses. Okay. Sneha, your question. We lost you out there. Okay, while we're waiting for your question, and nobody has any excuses. Wow, amazing. Not one person listening tonight that ever makes an excuse. Oh. Maybe their list is so long they're still typing. I don't know. But Sneha has her question. So does it mean that our external conditions does not have any influence on us? It doesn't mean it does and it doesn't. What Prabhupada is saying for a Krishna conscious person, it doesn't, and he's saying for one who's practicing Krishna consciousness, they should understand that ultimately it's not the situation, but it's how we respond to the situation. So yes, of course, if there's a problem, you'll be affected by that problem to the degree that you're not able to respond properly to it. So obviously, there's some disaster. If there's some disaster in your life, you will be affected. But in Krishna consciousness, it's how you respond to that and how quickly you overcome that. Now, if you're completely Krishna conscious, you would not be ill affected by the problems of this world. But as practicing devotees, what Prabhupada's trying to tell us is that every situation in the world is difficult, and we shouldn't blame the situation for our lack of Krishna consciousness, but we should try to see how in the particular situation we can make internal adjustments to deal with it so we can maintain a high level of Krishna consciousness. So the answer is yes and no. The answer is yes, we do get affected, and the answer is no, but we don't have to remain affected because we can respond to that. Just like sometimes someone may tell you something that upsets you, and you want to say something nasty, but you catch yourself and you don't do it. So you're affected by the condition, but you're responding in a proper way. So then ultimately, you're not affected by it. You're not allowing it yourself to be affected by it. Just like in previous classes we talked about forgiveness. So somebody hurt you, so how do you respond to that? Well, you feel like responding through resentment. But the proper response is to let the resentment go, to be kind, to be compassionate, to be empathetic, to be understanding. So that may not come immediately. First, what may come is the hurt and the anger and the revenge. But you understand that you have control of how you respond. And so you really understand that ultimately I can be Krishna conscious. In this situation, I can detach myself from my feelings of anger, and I can respond with compassion. So then you process that, you look at the situation, and then you decide this is how I'm going to respond. And so what happens sometimes, for example, in a situation like this, is you actually become more compassionate. Because now you're responding with compassion to a person who hurt you, which is an act of greater compassion than you might have been exhibiting towards that person anyway. So an adverse situation can stimulate a very positive reaction, a very Krishna conscious reaction on your part, and it can cause you to elevate your consciousness. So it's all about how you respond, and that's what Prabhupada's saying. Don't blame the external circumstances. It's not the external circumstances. They're always troublesome, they're always difficult. And so if you see a person is Krishna conscious, don't think they're not dealing with difficult situations. Just think they're dealing better with the difficulties that face them than I am dealing with the difficulties that face me. Don't think, oh, that's so-and-so, they're so Krishna conscious, they don't have to do anything. Never think that way. Every devotee has to deal with the problems, both external and internal. Every one of us has to deal with that. Every day of our life, practically every moment we have to deal with it. So it's really changing the consciousness rather than changing the environment. It's so much easier to change the consciousness than change the environment. Environment is what it is. Okay. Now none of you came up with your excuses. So let's see what time it is. We have 7 minutes for excuses. So I'll bring up some of the excuses that are common. And then you can see if you have any excuses left. Of course, I should ask Sneha, did that answer your question? Because if it didn't, we will continue to answer it. Or if you have another question, please ask. And while you're thinking about that, then we'll read you the list of excuses. Now, excuses particularly come up when there's something that you need to do that you believe is difficult, or it's something you don't want to do, or it's something that's going to require you to think in a different way or act in a different way, a way that you're not accustomed to doing. You find a lot of procrastination comes when we have to do something which is not comfortable, something we don't like. Like I have a business, but I don't like accounting, so I always put my accounting off. And after I look at numbers for like 20 minutes, I just get cross-eyed. It just bores me to death looking at numbers and charts and tracking from receipts to bank statements. And like some people like that. So I have to kind of gear myself up to do it. And that may sound funny for someone who likes numbers, who does accounting. But for me, it's just blah. And there are other devotees I know who are not, they don't feel comfortable giving classes. So if they're ever asked to give a class, they practically have a nervous breakdown the day of the morning of the class or the day before. What am I going to say? How am I going to do this? And that's not a problem for me. So we all, when we face that thing which is difficult for us, often requires a different attitude, different mode of behavior, and then we get some excuse and we say, well, I'm not really good at that. So if you want to change, you want to do something that's difficult for you, what are the excuses? Here's one. It's going to be difficult. So when you tell yourself it's going to be difficult, what do? Well, of course, if you're a very positive person, you'll work harder. But if not, what will you do? You will put it off. You will not do it. You'll make it seem more difficult than you think it is. I don't know. If you're young, you can't relate to this. But if you're older, if you get a cell phone, you get an iPhone, you get a computer, you get some digital equipment, you look at all the menus and you scratch your head and you go, I can't figure this out. So what do? You give it to your 9-year-old daughter and she tells you how to operate it. Because she doesn't think it's hard to operate. Because her whole life she grew up and she didn't deal with any analog tape recorders or analog telephones or analog MP3 players. She just dealt with digital stuff. So you have to you buy your new camera and you're looking at it and go, what button do I hit to do this? And you give it to your 9-year-old daughter and she'll figure it out without the manual. So as soon as we say something's difficult, what do? Oh, I can't deal with this, it's too difficult. It may not be difficult at all. But what do? We just don't do it because it's difficult. No, it's too difficult, I can't deal with it. Any of you have that experience? I can't do it. It's too difficult. This accounting is too difficult. I don't want to deal with it. This is all confusing. So, good excuse. It's too difficult. And then you just kind of, what do? You kind of zone out on it. I can't figure this out. Let's forget it. Here's another one. It's going to be risky. I'm not going to do it because it's going to be risky. What if I don't succeed? You see, what we're getting at here is excuses that prevent us from doing something. And Prabhupada said, in Krishna consciousness, we should be bold and daring. And here we go. I don't know. It's going to be risky. I don't think I should do it. Here's another one. It's going to take a long time. I'm not going to do that. It's going to take a long. I don't have that much time. It's going to take a long time, so I don't even start it. And these excuses are really good if you're lazy, because these are like really fit into your mentality. There's going to be a family drama. If I do this, everyone's going to go crazy. I'm going to create so many problems. It's not my nature to do this. Nah, I'm not going to do that. It's not my nature. You can do things that aren't your nature. Believe me, Krishna will empower you. I can't afford it. Very common one. I'm not going to do that because I can't afford it. When Prabhupada was in India, he was making plans in Mayapur, how to do things. And the manager would always say, where are we going to get the money? And Prabhupada would say, why are you always worried about the money? Krishna will give the money. So Prabhupada never thought in terms of how we can afford it. He just thought, this is what needs to be done. We need to publish books. We need to distribute them. We need to open temples. We need to open the World Center in Mayapur. He never thought about where the money's going to come from. He just thought about the project. And then the money came. So it's a different way of thinking. Think, what's the service? What's the vision? What do we want to do? Let's get that clear. Okay. I'm not strong enough. It never happened before. I never did this before. No one will help me. I can't do it. Nobody's going to help me. Is that absolutely true? No one's going to help you? Is that absolutely true? You're not strong enough? Is absolutely true? There's not going to be money? How do you know? You haven't even started. Is it absolutely true? It's going to be too difficult to do? How do you know? You haven't even tried. You haven't taken the first step. I'm not strong enough. I'm not smart enough. Don't have the energy. No one in my family has ever done it. I'm too busy. This is one of the most common ones. I don't have any time. I'm scared. Okay, we have a question. Okay, Sneha. What? What, the dog ate it. Oh. Oh, that didn't come up in the top 18 excuses. The dog ate it, yeah. Oh, that's a good one. So anyway, the point is that as I was saying initially, if you knew Srila Prabhupada and you knew what he expected, you'd never want to shirk your responsibility and go to Prabhupada with an excuse, because he would not accept the excuse. He'd always point to you and say, it's you. It's not them. It's you. So, we're going to end here unless you have a pressing question. And please relate that to everything we talked about in the discussion on the mind, because these are all things that the mind tells us. The ultimate defense of the mind is the excuse. And then you just imagine, here's the thought. I want to throw this thought by you. What? This is such a nice thought. What if I was counseling you, right? And we were trying, and you wanted to do something, but you were running into these problems because of these excuses. And I said to you, what did I say to you? I said, what would you do now if you couldn't use any of these excuses? Or how would that affect you? I just say, okay, you can't use any of these excuses. We're going to go for your goal, but you can't use any of these excuses. So now, now you're looking how you're going to do everything. And I just pulled the carpet out from under you, and I said, everything you've told me why you can't do it, I'm saying, I'm not going to allow you to use any of those excuses. What are you going to do now? And then obviously you think, oh, I guess I have to figure out my next step forward because I can't take any steps backwards. And that's the whole point. When you pull the carpet out from the excuses, then you realize you can only move forward. There's nowhere back to go because you don't have any excuses now. So let's pull the excuses out. Let's say, okay, right now, whatever it is you want to do tomorrow or the next day, whatever you face in the rest of your life, whatever excuse comes up, just tell yourself, I can't use this excuse. Mahatma won't let me. He's my coach. He's my counselor. And he's not going to let me use this excuse. So I have to throw this excuse in the trash can. Now what am I going to do? Then another excuse comes up. And he goes, oh my God, I can't use that excuse either. What am I going to do? I have to think of what I'm going to do. So it's going to be something positive. So very, very powerful meditation. Or you can think, Prabhupada, I can't go to Prabhupada with these excuses. Prabhupada wants me to do this service. He wants me to achieve these goals. I can't go to him with my excuses that I'm too stupid. I'm too tired. I don't have the money. I'm too busy. I can't go with these excuses. I just have to do it. What if Srila Prabhupada said that? I can't come to America because what? I'm too old. I'm not healthy enough. I don't have any security there. I don't have the money. I don't even know if I'll live there. He had so many good excuses, but he didn't make any. And that's why he came. I mean, he had some really good ones. Like he could come here to die. And he thought, maybe I will go to die. He actually thought like that. But he didn't use it as an excuse. Such a nice example, isn't it? I may go to America to die, but let me die executing the mission of my Guru. So even that was not an excuse. What a wonderful example. So let's keep that example in mind, and when we're thinking of all these excuses that are preventing us from moving forward, we can think, how could I tell Prabhupada I can't do it because of this? What would he say? In what way in his life did he ever show that you give in to excuses? He never showed that. So we will end here. Thank you very much. I hope this helps you, and this coming week, please put these ideas into practice, and then we can meet next week and we can discuss and see if you've got some realization, if in any way you've become empowered by this. Thank you, and we'll see you again. Hare Krishna.